Welcome in this session around insight activation. What will we cover today? Well, I will start with explaining why insight activation is so important. Secondly, we will take a look at what the difference is between sharing research results and activating consumer insights. And thirdly, last but not least, we will take a look at the 6 steps that you can take as a company, as an organization, to become a consumer-centric thinking company, to become a company where insights are used every single day by as many people as possible. So let's get started. So why is insight activation so important? Well, in the world of market research, we are all talking about impact, turning insights into business impact. It's a really hot topic. In order to investigate how hot it is, we did a piece of research among the buyers and users of market research, asking them about how good are you doing at this particular moment in turning insights into business action. And if things are not going as planned, are not going really well, what can we do to make some improvements? We surveyed in total 185 buyers and users of research, and afterwards, after that quantitative survey, we did in-depth interviews with 20 people, 20 CMI managers, market research managers from companies around the globe, to do a deep dive into the results and to co-create some potential solutions. What I will share with you now is like a couple of highlights, the kind of main findings of this study, the things that we found striking. The first conclusion, or the first interesting finding, is that most people think that if they would have more money to invest in market research, they would also gather more interesting and more consumer insights, and they would be able more to turn those insights into business impact. Although already a couple of years ago, the Boston Consulting Group did a very interesting study finding that actually there is no real correlation between how much money you spend on market research and the quality of the insights that you gather and the business impact that you produce. So actually, it's not about the money. It's not that if you have more money to spend on market research, that you will also gather better insights and have more impact on business decisions. So if it's not about the money, what is it then about? Well, that's a question we asked to the people in our survey too. Because we see that 45% of the insights that are gathered are not resulting into business impact. What's then the problem? Well, 2 things came up in the in-depth interviews. On the one hand, people said, well, we need to think more wisely about how we spend our money. We need to think more carefully about the projects that we're doing. We need to think more carefully and smarter about the methods that we're using. Because every researcher said that they are doing studies that they don't believe in themselves, that they know upfront that will not have a true impact on the business or that will not change a thing. Or they talked about studies that they are doing quite regularly, like tracking studies, and that not always it results in changes in the business. Secondly, they also said we need to rethink some of the methodologies that we're using, because the world of research and research methods is evolving really fast, and every single day almost there are new methods that allow you to gain better insights and to do the things you do faster and cheaper. So they proposed to do a kind of annual audit, an audit of the research methodologies that you use, and to do that with the team to investigate what methodologies do we want to keep or which methodologies can be replaced by newer and better ones. So that's the first thing you need to do. You don't need more money, you need to think more wisely about how you spend your money. Secondly, they said we also need to look at that other resource that we have, and that's time. The time that you have as an individual in the team. Also there they said we're probably spending our time on the wrong things. 70% of the time of the average market researcher in the study goes to actually running research projects, doing project management. While they say that the real impact can be made by talking with the people in the business upfront, trying to understand what type of insights they really need, and activating the insights afterwards. So helping the business to translate the insights into business action. What they actually said is it would be better if we could spend our time equally over those 3 boxes, so that a third of our time can go to understanding the business needs, understanding what the business is actually looking for in terms of consumer insights. Then of course 1/3 of the time can go still into running projects, talking to agencies, working together with agencies, doing market research project management. And the last third of the time can then go into activating consumer insights. So today it's 20% of the time in the first box, 70% of the time in the second box, and only like 10% of their time in the last box. They want to shuffle that around so that it becomes equally important. All 3 boxes, all 3 tasks are there in an equal sense. So what do you need to do if you're a market researcher? Think very carefully about how do I spend my money. Look at the projects you're doing. Take a look at next year. What are the projects that were impactful this year and you want to do more of next year? What were the projects that didn't cause the impact you were hoping for or expected, and do less of that? Secondly, take a look at the methodologies that you use to execute all of those different projects and ask yourself the question, is this still the best possible option? Or is there an option that gives me better insights, that allows me to do things cheaper and faster? And take a look at how you and your team are spending your time. Are you spending time on the right tasks? And of course, if we need to bring 70% of our time being spent on actual project management down to just 1/3 of our time, we probably need those newer methodologies, because they will allow us to save some time that we can reinvest in the first box and the last box, meaning understanding the business needs and activating consumer insights in the business. So what is it then that market researchers need to do? What's the kind of new position that market researchers need to take within companies? Well, in that regard, I really like this quote from Stan Stanunathan. And Stan is the Senior Vice President CMI at Unilever. In other words, he is the big boss of all researchers at Unilever. And this is the kind of mission he gives to his team. You need to become the people who provide inspiration and provocation to the business. The type of inspiration and provocation that will lead to certain actions that will lead to growth. In other words, he says, you need to be the people who are showing the business what to do next. You need to be the people who show the people in the business where the growth opportunities lie. And then the second part of his sentence is really interesting too, because he says, and insights are just the underlying hidden driver. So actually what he says is you don't need to be researchers, you need to be business consultants. And of course, it's for him a given that they understand research, that they are using the best possible research methodologies, that they understand how to turn data into insights. But that's all just a given for him. It's what you do with the insights, it's how you activate them in the business, it's how you help the people in the business to translate them into real business actions and impact. That's what's truly important according to him. And that's, I think, what we as researchers should do more. So how can we get there? Well, together with the 20 people in the in-depth interviews, we co-created a model, a 6-step plan to become a company where insights lead actually to business impact. I will guide you through this model, and the model actually has 3 different phases. The first step is all about what you can do already today. So almost immediately after this presentation, you can use a couple of the tips and tricks I will be sharing and use them in your next presentation, in your next workshop. Then we're moving to a couple of things you can start doing from tomorrow onwards. And it's a couple of aspects that you need to improve, that you need to bring in to your organization. And you will not see immediate impact of it, but gradually you will see that there are changes within the company and that it starts to have impact. And then last but not least, we will look at the day after tomorrow, where artificial intelligence will kick in and will help you to do better insights management. But let's start in the today. Let's start with a couple of things you can apply almost immediately. It's about how you can present in a more impactful way. So let's think about the ad hoc project you're working on at the moment. Let's think about the presentation, the workshop around the insights and the results from that ad hoc study. How can you bring those insights to the people in the business in a more impactful way? How can you bring those insights of that ad hoc study really to life? Well, at Insights Consulting, we have a three-step model, a three-step approach to do presentations, to do workshops, to share research results and insights. It's called Engage, Inspire, Activate. I will quickly go over each of the three steps and give a couple of examples, but basically engage is what you do before the presentation, inspire is how you give a different, more impactful presentation, and activate is what you do after your workshop or presentation to make people remember the results. First of all, engage. Engage is all about making sure that the people that are there to watch your presentation, to be part of your workshop, are there with their full attention. Because very often you have people walking into a meeting room ready for a presentation, not even knowing what the presentation will be about. Or they are stressed out about the previous meeting they had, or they are already preparing the next one. So mentally, they are not fully there. They are not ready for your message. So we need to engage with them upfront to make sure that they are there with their full attention, that they are curious, that they are hungry to listen to you, that their minds are warmed up for your message. And here we can learn a couple of things from Hollywood, because in Hollywood they understand very well how they can make you curious to go and watch a certain movie. They do posters, they do movie trailers, they send actors on tour. They create a whole campaign to make sure you know what the movie is about and that you're really curious to see more. We can do exactly the same thing. We can hang up posters in the premises of the company with on there like striking numbers, striking figures, or shocking consumer quotes from the study. We can make a little trailer, a little 30-second movie that gives a couple of highlights of what we learned about the consumer world in the study. We can do a tour around the company and pre-inform already a couple of people when it's a very sensitive topic that we are about to discuss. This is all about not already sharing the research results, but making people curious, making them hungry for more, and making sure that when they are there in your presentation, they will be there with their fullest attention. A last example is the one you see here on the screen. It's doing a little quiz before the workshop or presentation with the people who will be there. 10 questions about the research results that they are about to see. And after each question, they immediately know if they answered right or wrong. And in most of the cases, through a movie, a quote, or a kind of picture, it's the consumer telling them why they are right or why they are wrong. What we're doing here is actually already sharing a couple of the results, teasing a little bit. We are confronting them also 10 times with their consumers and with the consumer world through the movies, pictures, and quotes, but we are also confronting them with their own knowledge or their lack of knowledge about the subject. Because at the very end of the little quiz, they get a score. And we try to make sure that the score is always between a 4 and a 6, so that people don't feel like fully comfortable about how much they know about the topic already, but they also don't feel totally depressed about their lack of knowledge of the subject. But we have them exactly where we want them to be. They are curious to understand more, and they feel like the presentation will be useful for them because they have a lack of knowledge around the subject that you want to discuss. So this is the engage phase. It's all about making sure that people are ready to receive your message. Then we have the inspiration phase. It's the actual presentation. One of the things we do too much when we present is we use too many slides and we talk too much. On average, you have a presentation of an hour, 55 minutes you talk and present lots of slides with lots of content on them, and then there is 5 minutes for questions and discussion. Actually, a while ago, I met a Swiss professor that is specialized in how do you give an impactful presentation to an audience of managers. And he has a couple of rules of thumb around how can you give an interesting presentation. And his first rule is that if you have an hour, you only present for 20 minutes and you use a maximum of 20 slides. And when using those slides, you are going not to present everything you know about the subject, not everything that was in the survey or that you learned from consumers in qualitative research. No, you're gonna share with them the things you think they need to know. You're gonna curate the interesting elements. Of course, that implies that you had conversations upfront with the people in the business about what their business objectives are, that you really understand what kind of insights that can help them to make different and better business decisions. So you're going to curate on those 20 slides in 20 minutes. This is what I think they need to know. And it's also a wise idea to share the insights first and then bring them to life, because it's a little bit a crazy idea that you are presenting for minutes and minutes and minutes, and you leave the thing people come for, like the insights and the conclusions and the recommendations, for the last 5 minutes of your presentation. Like a lady once said to me in a workshop in Barcelona, we should remember that giving a presentation is not like doing a striptease. The best part shouldn't be at the end. So this is what you need to do. You have an hour, the first 20 minutes is presenting, maximum of 20 slides, and you bring the insights to life. You don't keep the most interesting stuff for the last 5 minutes. Then we have 40 minutes left. What do we do during those 40 minutes? Well, the second block of 20 minutes is all about playing with the data. Because my Swiss professor friend found out that if you have a group of managers, they will believe what you're saying more if they have seen it with their own eyes. It will also stick longer with them if they have seen it with their own eyes. So if you present them an insight, you can afterwards, in the playing part of your presentation, you can bring up all the observations, facts and figures that are behind the insights, that help you to come to the insight. So let them do some reverse engineering. Or if it's a very quantitative presentation, well, then you can let them play with a dashboard and let them do some little analysis themselves. So it's all about letting them see the data behind the insights so that they will believe it and that it will stick longer with them. And then the last 20 minutes of your presentation is all about discussion and also thinking about actions and next steps. Because often we see that at the end of a presentation, people are looking at each other. They want to understand or try to understand what other people around the table, maybe from other departments, thought about the results, but we are not taking the time to speak about it. So it's about taking the time to let everyone around the table give their kind of first impressions, first spontaneous reactions to what they have seen, so that you, as one of the people in the audience, can see, is there social buy-in for what's just has been presented? Are the other people around the table also thinking that we should do something with these particular insights? And secondly, it's also the moment where you can talk about what does this mean for us as a company, as an organization, and what are the steps we want to take based upon these insights. So a great presentation, an inspiring presentation, if you have 1 hour, it's 20 minutes of presenting, it's 20 minutes of playing with the data behind the insights that you presented, and it's 20 minutes taking the time to have a good discussion and to talk about next steps and actions. So we have the engage part, that's what you do before that presentation or before that workshop. We have the inspire part, where we have a couple of rules of thumb that we can use to give the most impactful presentation. And then last but not least, it's the phase after the presentation, the activate bit. What can you do here? Well, first of all, an easy one is that if you are the researcher in the room during the presentation, during the last 20 minutes of the presentation, when people talk about next steps and actions, you're making notes. You're making notes. What are the actions that people talk about? Who has said what? You can use that to book like a short meeting a couple of weeks after the presentation to sit down with a couple of the internal stakeholders over a coffee and remind them about what they have said during that meeting. Maybe ask them also, you have said that you want to take that particular action. Is there something I can do to help you? Can I help you to translate the insight into an action? Can I help you with reaching your goals? But another option is that you start a little campaign to make sure that people will never forget the insights. And that's particularly relevant when you have like big fundamental pieces of research, strategic pieces of research. Like in the example I want to share with you of Viacom MTV Networks, the television station, where we did a big piece of qualitative research. We did research with 150 youngsters from 10 different cities around the world to talk about how it is to be young and to live in one of those big urban areas. So what's the kind of urban millennial lifestyle? We gathered very interesting insights to translate into television concepts, but also advertising concepts and activation campaigns. It was actually a study that at Viacom they wanted that people would use those insights for the next 3 years at least. So we needed some kind of advertising campaign to make sure that people were remembered about the insights almost all the time. And one of the particular tasks in the research community that we did for MTV was that we asked all those youngsters in all those different cities, what are the hot spots in your city? What are the cool places to have a drink, to go out, to shop, to hang around, to entertain yourself? So we had actually for the 10 cities in our study like a list of the hotspots, the places where actually the target group of MTV was hanging out. So what did we do? For each of those 10 cities, we created a little city guide. And when senior executives of Viacom were going on a business trip, they got that city guide. And they got that simple task, please, if you're there in that particular city, visit a couple of the places where your target group is hanging out, that we know from the study. So actually what happened is when they went on a business trip, they were also immersed into the world of their audience. And while being there, they saw a couple of the insights that we shared with them happening with their own eyes. While being immersed in the world of the target group, they were thinking back of the research results, they were thinking back of the insights, and we saw that lots of people, after having such an experience, when back on the plane home, they were making plans, they were taking action, they were translating the insights into action. So what you need to do when you have your next presentation or workshop is you not only need to think about how can I give the most impactful, inspiring presentation or workshop itself, you also need to think about what am I going to do before the presentation and what am I going to do after the presentation. So actually, if you look at what we try to do when we're presenting in a more impactful way is we try to create multiple touch points. We don't present the research result just once, we present the research results at least 3 times, but in different formats. Secondly, it's all about snackable content. It's about short kind of tasks that we give to people. It's about little things that we ask them to do. We ask them upfront to watch a 30-second movie. We ask them to spend 10 minutes of their time in the engage phase to take a little quiz. Even in our presentation, if we have a 1-hour presentation, it's 3 blocks of 20 minutes. And afterwards, we do a couple of things to make sure that the results will be activated. We book a meeting over a coffee of half an hour or even just 15 minutes to ask them how is it going with translating the insights into action. We give them like short tasks, like in the example of MTV, to make sure they will think back about the presentation and about the insights. Another thing that is important is that it's curated insights. You can only do this kind of advertising campaign for your research results, if you know perfectly what your audience wants. So it's so important that you are connected with the people in the business and that you understand what's on their plate, what they are busy with, and that you give them the insights they might need at the moment they might need them. And finally, it's all about creating a kind of learning experience. It's not just sit down, relax. It's also in modern education. People need to do something. They need to do a little quiz. They need to immerse in the world of their target group. They also need to think and interact with the content during the presentation. If you follow a couple of these tips and tricks, I'm sure that your next presentation will be more impactful. But unfortunately, that's not enough. It's not enough that we as researchers change. We also need to think about what can we do to make sure that the people at the other end of the table are going to receive the message very well. And one of the problems that we see when giving presentations to internal stakeholders within companies is that very often they don't get the concept of why market research is important. They don't understand what a consumer insights is. They don't understand how a consumer insight can help them to come to certain marketing campaigns or to do innovation. That's why it's so important to train your internal stakeholders to make sure that they understand how they can use an insight and how it can help them in their day-to-day job. That's why more than ever we train internal stakeholders in this. We train them to understand what an insight is, how powerful it is, and how they can use it in day-to-day planning, in their day-to-day job. We did this, amongst others, for Suntory, Orangina, Schweppes. We trained around the globe in 10 different countries, more than 300 marketing and innovation managers. And literally, the CMI people within the company said that just by doing that kind of 2-day training session for all those different people, their jobs changed completely. Because now they give a presentation and the people at the other end of the table understand what they're seeing. They understand the value of the insights, but they perfectly understand now how they can take that particular insight and turn it into business impact. So it's not only about you as a researcher giving a different style of presentation, it's also about making sure that the people at the other end of the table, the people you're talking to, speak the same language, understand how to use what you're giving them. And the second thing that is important, talking about internal stakeholders, is that they see the broader consumer context, because still you can have a consumer insight but not fully get it as an internal stakeholder, as for example a marketing or innovation manager. And why is that? Because in most of the cases the marketing people don't live the same lives as their average consumer. I have seen too many people, for example in traditional focus groups, behind the one-way mirror telling us, where did you get those people that are not my consumers? Or why don't they get our new marketing campaign? Why is that? It's not consumers who don't get it. In most of the cases, it's marketing people or innovation people assuming that the average consumer is like them, has the same kind of needs, has the same kind of background, and understands, for example in advertising, the same type of jokes. That's why it's so important that marketing people, innovation people, business people in general understand that they live in some kind of bubble and that they are not living the average life of their consumers, or that they only live the life of a particular segment and that there are so many different segments around that segment. That's why it's so important to do consumer immersion sessions, to connect or reconnect with consumers. And that's a true problem, because out of a little study we did, we know that marketing people on average only talk with real consumers 2 times a year. So they miss that kind of connection, that kind of reality check. What lots of companies do is they organize consumer closeness or consumer connect programs, meaning that people go and visit the houses of consumers, do shop-alongs, have chats with consumers, to understand their kind of daily life and to have a broad understanding of their target group and to have a broad context that they can use to make an interpretation of a certain insight. The problem with classical consumer connects is that it's quite expensive, is that it's quite time consuming, and that it has an impact on the day itself, but a couple of weeks later is just business as usual. And that's because companies are not doing it enough, especially because it's time consuming and because it's so expensive. What we created actually at Insights Consulting is an app to make sure that marketing people get every month or every 2 weeks, depending on the frequency you want, a task. They receive it on their phone. It's a quick task, it's something you need to do and it only takes 15 minutes to do and 15 minutes to report back to us, but it can be like go to the nearest supermarket and observe one consumer in front of the shelf in which your product is. It can be something as simple as that. They need to do it, they need to make a couple of observations, and they need to report back their learnings also in the app. And the wonderful thing is that they can see also what their colleagues who received the same task have observed. So for example, if 30 marketing people within a company receive that task, they are not only going to learn from their own observations, but they learn from also the observation of the other 29 of their colleagues. After a certain period, we stop the observation kind of phase and we try to, with the group, try to see what have we learned. How can we turn all those observations into an insight, and how can we turn the insight into particular kind of actions we're going to take. So digitalizing this kind of consumer connect idea makes that you can do it more often, making sure that we are not doing it during a full day. No, we are spreading it across the year, makes it also not too time consuming. And the fact that you can see what others have reported on the app makes it an even more interesting learning experience. And of course, the fact that we can brainstorm also all together about potential actions also means that it's gonna lead immediately to certain improvements in the business. And of course, if you do this every single month, you're constantly remembered about the fact that you're not your average consumer. So actually, the first kind of phase of our 6-step model is about what you can do, presenting in a different way. Phase 2 and phase 3 in the model is about how you can give your internal stakeholder a certain skill. The skill of understanding what an insight is and knowing how to translate an insight into business strategies. And secondly, you give them empathy, you give them a broad consumer context so that when they see an insight, they can empathize with it and they understand where it comes from. They understand the insight more deeply and they know how they can make an interpretation of it. Then we're moving into the second part of what you can do tomorrow. And that's all about the flow of insights within your organization. When we talk about flow, we can actually talk about two things. You can talk about mental flow and mental availability of insights, and you can talk about physical flow and the physical availability of insights. Let's first talk about mental availability of insights. This has everything to do with the fact that too often we're presenting insights with people at the wrong moment. It's not the moment that they need the insights, that they want the insights, or we present it to them in the wrong format. So it's thinking about a communication plan for consumer insights. Because you have a business plan, you have a market research plan, because you do certain pieces of market research to make sure that at a certain moment you can make a certain business decision, but we don't think carefully enough about the communication plan for the insights we gather in research. So it's thinking about what's the ideal moment to share a particular research results or insight with a particular team or person, and what format would be ideal for that team, for that person at that particular moment. So it's strategizing the communication of consumer insights. One of the things we learned is that if you share, for example, the research results of an ad hoc study, that you only need to share at that particular moment what the people in the teams can use immediately. We have the tendency to also share with them nice to know kind of insights, or insights that can have an impact on the long term, like an insight that can come in very handy in a couple of months from now when they do their annual planning. Well, they don't listen to that. When they have a presentation of an ad hoc study, actually they only listen to the things they can use immediately, that are relevant for the things that are on their plate at that particular moment. So don't present those things that can be handy in a couple of months from now. Put them almost in some kind of fridge and save them for later. When do you open the fridge? When is that later? Well, there are particular moments throughout the year when you organize a workshop around a more kind of strategic theme. It can be solving a particular aspect of the customer journey where you have a couple of issues still. And then you're focusing for half a day or even a day on that particular issue only. And what you do as a service, as a market researcher within the company, is you will open your fridge and you will take out the research results and insights that can help to solve that particular problem. So actually what you do is, when you have an ad hoc study, you only present what is of immediate use, but at certain moments throughout the year, you actually help marketing and innovation people, managers, to save time. Because in half a day, they will learn everything that there is to know about that particular subject, that consumers have told you about that particular issue. And together with them, you're probably going to turn those observations into insights. Especially if it's people that went through a training about consumer insights, it can be a lot of fun to do that together, to go through that process together, but it can come in very handy in terms of impact as well. Because we have seen many times that if people have turned the observations into insights themselves, marketing and innovation people, it feels like it's their insight and they're going to do more with it. They're going to take it with them and really going to use it more often. And there is a third and last stream of content that you need to take into account when creating some kind of communication plan for insights, and that are like the consumer connects that you're doing. So what you get is actually a communication plan with 3 streams of content. Your ad hoc projects, your kind of more workshopy moments where you tackle big strategic issues, and throughout the year you also have a constant kind of stream of consumer connect sessions or interesting consumer stories that you share. And there the only goal is to make sure that the consumer always stays top of mind when it comes to making decisions. So that's the kind of mental availability of consumer insights. Then it's about the physical availability of consumer insights. And here I often ask market researchers in organizations, if I walk into your organization and I ask you, show me your consumer insights, where will you take me? I have never had the answer, I will take you to a big vault and there is a bodyguard in front because that's where we keep our insights that can be turned into gold. No, in most of the cases the answer is, well, I will take you to my computer and we will go onto our server, and somewhere on there in a PowerPoint there are a couple of my consumer insights. And that's exactly, I think, what we do. We lock up consumer insights in PowerPoint reports, and almost the only person who can find them back is the CMI manager, the market research manager at the client side. So it's like you have a big box full of great consumer insights that can come in very handy for lots of people in the organization, but most people don't know that they exist. And even if they know they exist, they cannot find them back. That's why we at Insights Consulting created our Insight Activation Studio. It's actually a Pinterest-like platform, a social media platform on which you can store your consumer insights. I talked a couple of minutes ago about that kind of fridge in which you can store consumer insights. Well, actually, this is that particular fridge. All your consumer insights go onto it, And when you have a project, when you have like that big workshop moment to solve a strategic issue, you can open the fridge, you can go on the Insight Activation Studio, create a page, and add all the different insights to that page that can come in handy and are relevant when solving that particular issue. So it's actually a database of all the consumer insights that you have. But it's not only a database, it's making sure that those insights are also accessible for the many people within the organization. And it's a platform that makes sure that those insights are gonna be used into projects. So we actually talked about presenting in a different way. We talked about making sure our stakeholders understand the value and beauty of consumer insights. We talked about making sure that our stakeholders feel closer to consumers, and we talked about the mental and physical availability of insights, the kind of communication plan for insights, and the platform on which you store your insights. This is all very much push. We're pushing insights into the business. But actually, what we want is that people in the business make it a habit to use consumer insights. That it becomes pull. That we don't need to push them the insights. No, they will have that reflection every time they need to make a business decision. What would the consumer do? Do we have a consumer insight that can help us to solve this particular issue? So we need to make sure that using consumer insights becomes a habit. Creating habits is very difficult. You probably all know about good intentions, and most of you will say, well, good intentions, I don't do that thing anymore because it doesn't work. Which is true, because scientific research shows that by the end of February, when you have made good intentions on the 1st of January, 88% of the people have failed, are not doing the thing anymore that they intended to do. So the question is not what do the 88% do wrong? The question is, what do the 12% do right? Because the 12% can learn us something about how you can install habits within an organization, how you can change the culture and the behavior of people within an organization. How, for example, you can make sure that people are going to use consumer insights for every business decision they need to take. So what do the 12% do right? Well, first of all, they have a plan. They have a plan on how they will get there. Secondly, yes, they fail, but they are persistent and they adapt the plan. And last but not least, yes, they are ambitious, but not overly ambitious. So when you want to install new habits in your organization, for example, about consumer insights or around consumer-centric thinking, do it in small steps. Don't say, tomorrow everyone needs to use consumer insights for every single business decision they make. No, start somewhere more down the line. Start small. Secondly, yes, it will not go well from day one. In most cases, most people fail 7 times, so need to adapt their plan, also called a habit loop, 7 times before it works for them, before it's a success. And we know from science that for 2 months, you need to push yourself to perform that habit and to follow your little plan before it really becomes a habit, before it becomes something that you do almost automatically. So think about that kind of plan. And in order to illustrate that kind of plan, I will use a very personal example because I have a habit too. I had on the 1st of January a good intention, like I want to do more sports. My main motivator to do more sports is, of course, I want to live a long and healthy life, and I was realizing maybe I need to do more sports to make that happen. So I thought about what could be an interesting sport to me. What could be something that I really like? I don't like running. I like cycling, but it's difficult because the weather is not always nice enough. So I thought, well, let's do something I can do inside because then the weather is not an issue. And I like swimming. So I decided, let's do swimming 2 times a week for an hour. So you see, I'm ambitious, but not overly ambitious. I'm not saying that I will become the next world champion in swimming. I'm not saying that I will do swimming every single day, No, it's just 2 times a week for an hour. Making it easy. No kind of ambitions also in terms of performance. It's just doing 1 hour of swimming twice a week. I have thought very carefully about my plan. Like, what's the kind of moment when I decide that I will go swimming? Well, I know that I have a busy schedule, so what I do on Sunday evening is I plan my swimming into my calendar and I treat it like a meeting with a client. I make sure that I'm gonna do it, and the good thing is sometimes a client can reschedule a meeting. The swimming pool will not do that to me. Secondly, of course, I have learned to also ask my wife if it's a good idea to go swimming on that particular moment, because maybe she wants to do something and I need to take care of the kids. So you see, you learn by doing. That's something you learn along the way. Another thing I've learned is that it's not a wise idea to go home after work before going to the swimming pool. For all people who have kids, you know that it's very difficult to then continue doing something else. I also learned that it's very important to have your swimming gear in your car and maybe have a second pair of gear in there for the case you forgot to take out your wet gear from last time. So you start to realize a couple of things that can hold you down from doing it. So that's very important. You need to be motivated, of course. Secondly, you need to think about, when am I going to perform my task? What will be the starting point of my task? So I plan it into my calendar and I go immediately in the evening after work. Don't go home. And I know about all the things that could hold me down from doing my kind of weekly routine. And I have found solutions for it. I have thought about it. But that doesn't come from the very first minute. I also failed a couple of times. I learned from it and I adapted my plan. And then it's very important to have a kind of reward. After you performed your habit, what's the reward? Well, for me, it's when I walk out of the swimming pool at 8:30 in the evening, it feels like it's 8:30 in the morning again, because you feel totally energized. Secondly, I also share the fact that I just did my swim on social media, telling all the friends that were organizing a bet on the 1st of January on the fact that I wouldn't make it, to show that actually it's going very well and they can start preparing for the party they promised me if I make it. So that's a short-term reward, because the long-term reward, living a long and happy, healthy life, will not be enough. There needs to be some kind of instant gratification. There needs to be kind of instant reward. So this is a habit loop. This is the kind of plan that you can use to install habits around consumer centricity and customer insights in your organization too. But you need to plan for it. And you need to start really small. Sometimes even with tiny habits, little habits that are so easy to do that maybe you don't need a big plan like I having for my swimming habit. And I will give a couple of examples. The first one is from a guy at Global CMI in a candy company. And what he does at the beginning of every project, when people come and ask him advice or they want to brief him on a new project they want to do, he's asking 3 times the why question. Why do you want to do it? What do you want to do with the research results? What is going to change in the business? So he's like a journalist. He asks a lot of W questions. First time that he was doing that, just asking questions, not giving advice, not saying, yes, we will do this project, but just asking questions, and only questions like why, what, how, those kind of things, people thought he went nuts. But after a while, they were changing their behavior. They were coming to him with like a one-pager on which they already had thought about all the questions. Or they came to him, even better, and they told him, well, we have thought about it a couple of times. We have thought about the questions you normally ask, and we have realized that you actually don't need any additional market research. So this kind of little habit he has changes the behavior of his internal stakeholders, and he literally says that it's saving him time and money. He's not doing projects anymore that people in the business haven't thought carefully enough about. And he is saving time as well, because he is not spending his time on the project that will not have an impact in the business. Leaving him more time, of course, to go into the business and try to understand their kind of needs and to help other people with relevant projects to translate insights into business action. A final one from a lady in a French governmental organization, and what she does at the end of every presentation is she asks everyone around the table, what's the one thing you will do differently based on this presentation? At first, people didn't know what to say. Now she sees that people during the meeting are taking more notes, and they start to think about, what does this mean for me? What's the relevance in here for me? And at the end of the presentation, they are not giving her one thing, they're giving her a couple of things. Of course, interesting things in the activation phase she can follow up upon. So this is all about the today and the different phases of tomorrow. Then the last part on the day after tomorrow. That's where artificial intelligence will kick in and will help you to do better insights management. Because as a researcher, you have almost daily those kind of emails or questions via the telephone. Do we have an insight about target group X in country Y? That kind of question where you then need to dive into your archive of PowerPoint reports to dig something up. You need to think very carefully, do we have something around this and can I help this person? Well, that's probably where artificial intelligence can come in handy. We have developed Galvin, and Galvin is an artificial intelligent chatbot that can help you exactly with that particular question. Because Galvin is connected to our studio platform. Remember that fridge in which you store your consumer insights and keep them fresh. So Galvin, when you chat with Galvin, he will translate your question into a search query, and he will bring you back everything he knows about that particular topic that might be handy for you. And by asking you a couple of follow-up questions, step by step, you will get to that one particular insight that you need and that you can use as an internal stakeholder. So Galvin will help with that in the future. So in the future, all of you will probably have some kind of AI or robot colleague like Galvin helping you with those kind of repetitive questions. But we are also thinking about what Galvin can do more. One of the things that Galvin can do is deliver insights to people that didn't even ask for it. What we do already today, given the fact that the studio is a social platform, is the Amazon kind of trick. People like you at this particular moment are also reading this insight, are reacting on this insight, are using this insight, so maybe this can be something for you. So Galvin is giving recommendations, is giving you insight that he thinks you might need. But we're dreaming of a day where we can look into your Outlook calendar and where we can give you in the morning, when you have your morning coffee, some kind of morning briefing, where Galvin gives you the insights he thinks you might need based on the meetings that are in your Outlook calendar. So that's the moment, I think, where insight activation isn't reactive anymore, but it becomes a proactive thing. We're gonna bring insights to people that didn't even know that they might need that insights during that particular day. So this is what I wanted to share with you. So for your next presentation, I hope you use a couple of tips and tricks that I shared with you. I really hope that you think about giving a training to your internal stakeholders, making sure that they can connect more with their audience. Think about how you can create that kind of communication plan for insights, how you can make insights accessible for the many people in your organization. Start installing a couple of small and tiny habits upon your internal stakeholders and start dreaming about a world where tools like Galvin will become your colleague. And I'm sure if you can do all of this, that one day market researchers will definitely become the superstars of their organizations, because in a world that is changing fast, that's changing so dramatically, insights are what people need to reinvent their business and to understand what the next move as an organization should be.